This is a focused attack. This kid's motive might be sexual, it might be revenge, but it was definitely focused just at the teacher.
Unspeakable. That's the word one school official is using to describe the murder of a beloved high school teacher.
Chaden Miller and Jeremy Gooddale are charged with first-degree homicide.
She will be remembered a mother and genuine teacher with a generous spirit who led by example.
Teachers are some of the most important members of our society, tasked with the often difficult challenge of educating our youth. Unfortunately, they are often not given the respect that they really deserve, and some are treated quite badly. In fact, in some truly horrible cases, teachers have been senselessly murdered. We have a young teacher horrifically violated and killed by a student she had been trying to help. We have two teenage boys who came together in a disturbing plot to kill their 66-year-old Spanish teacher while she took her daily walk. And finally, we have a 15-year-old who described stabbing his 61-year-old teacher in front of the entire class as fine and dandy.
The latest on the shocking killing of the high school math teacher, a 14-year-old student you see there under arrest right now. And ABC's Gio Benitez is live in Danvers, Massachusetts with the latest. Good morning, Gio.
Good morning to you, Robin. That beloved teacher, just 24 years old. Her accused murderer, a JV soccer player here at the school.
Colleen Ritzer was a young and beautiful high school math teacher who was passionate about her job. She was from Danvers, Massachusetts. Colleen was born to Tom and Peggy Ritzer and had two younger siblings. She was known for being very positive, kind, and willing to help others any chance she got. She was very close to her family. She had always known that she wanted to be a teacher one day, even when she was very young. Colleen wasn't one of those teachers that was just there because she had to be. She absolutely loved teaching, and her energy was evident to her students. She had a Twitter account where she would tweet out to her students sharing positive things. She would also start out most of her classes with inspirational quotes or pictures.
She was energetic and compassionate. You couldn't ask for anything more from a teacher or a friend. She cared about every single student and put in many hours after school every day, always thinking about how she could be better and better help students. She was truly a beautiful person.
Colleen knew that not everyone is naturally skilled at math, so she used unique approaches to help those who were struggling. In fact, she actually helped some students who hated math come to like the subject. It was because of all these things that she was very beloved and popular with her students.
She could find joy in anything, and she brought so much joy into my life.
This was the school where Colleen taught at, Danvers High School. October 22nd of 2013 had gone like a normal school day. Classes had ended and the school was clearing out as most people started to head home. But Colleen, given the dedicated teacher that she was working with a few other students in her classroom, mentoring them. She left the class to go speak briefly with another teacher before heading to the second floor restroom. This is the last picture of her alive. At around 6:30 that same day, a woman named Diana Chisholm made a frantic call to the police department. She said that her son, Philip Chisholm, was missing. Philip was a 14-year-old student who attended the same school that Colleen taught at. He and his family had just recently moved there from Tennessee. He was quiet and very reserved. His parents had just gone through a divorce, which was part of the reason behind his recent move. He was good at sports, but not very good at socialization or skill work.
He just seemed quiet and reserved, but he seemed normal other than that. He made jokes still. If you talked to him, he would talk back to you, but he wouldn't really start conversations often.
On the day that Philip went missing, he also hadn't shown up for soccer practice or the team meal that they were supposed to be having that day.
At first, we thought he was either abducted or just gone missing.
Later on in the evening, the school principal sent out a campus-wide email alerting everyone that there was a 14-year-old student missing. Meanwhile, Colleen's parents were becoming concerned because Colleen lived with them and she hadn't returned home that day. They ended up calling another teacher about this, and that teacher informed the principal. Colleen's father drove to the school to look for her. He noticed that her car was still in the parking lot, but that there was no sign of her. Something was definitely wrong. There was both a teacher and a student missing, and nobody had heard from either of them. Slowly, the pieces are put together. It's noted that Philip had been in Colleen's classroom at the end of the day and would have been among some of the last people to see her. The principal and several teachers decide to go back to the school to search for them. They went into her classroom, but nothing seems to be out of place. By 11:20 that night, Colleen's parents officially issued a missing persons report. Police were quick to act and decided to ping her cell phone. They traced it to a location just about a 24-minute walk from the school. They then pinged Philip's phone and traced it to a nearby movie theater. But when they arrived at the theater, there was no sign of him. Police did end up finding Colleen's purse not far from the school, but all of her cards and money had been removed. Police also noticed something strange in the second-floor women's bathroom at the school. It was what appeared to be red and brown stains on the floor. They looked very much like blood. Meanwhile, a pedestrian had noticed a figure walking alone in the night. This figure was determined to be none other than the missing Philip Chisholm. Police approached him, patted him down, and found a knife on him. But that's not all. When they opened up his backpack, they also found a bloody box cutter, Colleen's credit cards, and a pair of her underwear. Philip told the police that he had simply found the items laying around by a local store and decided to take them, but obviously he's not believed. When he was asked again where he got the items, he looked at the officers and calmly told them that the girl was in the woods and that there was nothing they could do to help her. He was then taken into custody. Police made a horrible discovery not long after in some local woods. It was Colleen, and she was dead.
Investigators say Philip Chisholm killed Colleen Ritzer around 3:30 p.m. Tuesday, reportedly with a box cutter in the school's faculty bathroom, and that surveillance cameras show him using what appears to be a recycling bin to move her body to the woods.
It was determined that Philip would be tried as an adult. His mother was devastated upon hearing the news about her son.
He has been charged as an adult with Ritzer's murder, his mother in tears, Chisholm pleading not guilty. Sadly, Miss Ritzer's final tweet was about Monday's school shooting in Nevada, another student allegedly killing a math teacher there. Ritzer called it simply devastating.
Colleen's family released the following statement after her death.
At this time, we are mourning the tragic death of our amazing, beautiful daughter and sister. Everyone that knew and loved Colleen knew of her passion for teaching and how she mentored each and every one of her students. We would like to ask everyone to respect our privacy at this most difficult time. Thank you all for your thoughts and prayers.
There was one major question remaining. Why? Why would someone do this to a sweet young woman who was just trying to do her best to help others?
I would assume this kid's motive might be it might be revenge, but it was definitely focused just at the teacher. And my sense is the murder part of it may be secondary, that whatever he did, if this was a sexual assault, for example, that like so many people, they realize what they've done, how much trouble they're in, and they try to get rid of the evidence.
And you say the use of this.
As it would turn out, this assessment was pretty much on the mark. The heartbreaking details regarding the state of Colleen's body when it was found will make you absolutely sick to your stomach. Poor Colleen was naked from the waist down. She had been stabbed, strangled, and taken advantage of sexually. As if that were not enough, Philip brutally violated her by sticking a tree branch into her before leaving her in a sexually suggestive position. There was a note left next to her body that said, "I hate you all." Bloody gloves and a pair of bloody jeans were found not far from where she was laid. By speaking with other students, the police began to piece together Colleen's final moments before her death. She had asked Philip to stay behind after class and do some prep work for an upcoming test. During that time, they engaged in some small talk. Things started out normal, but When Colleen mentioned the name of the town that Philip had just moved from, he became visibly upset. Colleen noticed this and quickly changed the topic. It was determined that after Colleen left to go to the bathroom, Philip put his hood up and followed her down the hallway. We now know that when she entered the bathroom, he came in after her, stripped her, stabbed her, and took advantage of her. When he was doing all of these things, a girl would actually end up entering the bathroom. She had just barely walked inside when she saw someone who was partially naked. She didn't get a good look, but she believed that someone was changing clothes. She didn't want to bother them, so she quickly left. Cameras then caught Philip walking down the hall. He went in and out of the school several times collecting supplies. At one point, he put on a black ski mask. He was later captured pulling a recycling bin down the hall. It was in this recycling bin where he would place Colleen's body and take it out of the school. As horrific as it is, it would later be determined that Colleen was most likely still alive inside that recycling bin when all of this was happening. Here you can see him crossing through the parking lot with the trash can, appearing completely casual. After moving the body, he would later return to the school to retrieve some of his belongings. He was then caught on camera at the movie theater purchasing a ticket for a 4:30 p.m. movie. Maybe he thought this would help provide him with an alibi for around the time Colleen was suspected to have gone missing. We know this wouldn't work, as he was ultimately arrested hours later. So now we know that the gruesome details that not only led up to Colleen's murder, but what occurred during and after her murder. The question remains, what will happen to Philip?
Mike, 14-year-old Philip Chisholm said next to nothing during today's arraignment, except to plead not guilty to murdering 24-year-old Colleen Ritzer.
Take it straight to this indictment. Guilty or not guilty? Not guilty.
Philip did little to make himself look better while he was awaiting trial. In fact, he actually attacked yet another young female woman.
It happened Monday at the youth detention facility in Dorchester. Sources tell News Center 5, 15-year-old Philip Chisholm attacked a female staffer. The assault eerily similar to the deadly attack last fall on Danvers High math teacher Colleen Ritzer.
It would later be released that Philip attacked the victim when she was alone and put his hands around her neck to choke her. It was clear he intended to not only kill her, but take advantage of her sexually. Luckily, other staff members were able to get her and help before it was too late. At this point, it is quite frankly more than evident that Philip Chisholm is not only a dangerous, heartless, and remorseless monster, but eager and willing to kill again. Prosecutors were determined to bring him down, and they did not hold back their emotion.
In the middle of what should have been a normal day, in the middle of the afternoon. And make no mistake, they didn't happen to Philip Chisholm. He did these terrible things to Colleen Ritzer, and she was only 24 years old. And the only still image that matters in this case is the image of Colleen in the woods. The image that the defendant painted of Colleen stripped, battered, brutalized, and violated.
But Philip's defense argued that there was a history of mental health issues in his family, and that it was very likely that he struggled with schizophrenia and psychosis.
So what is this case about? This case is about why did this happen? Why did a 14-year-old boy, well-behaved, quiet, 1 month into high school, do these terrible things? The answer is he was severely mentally ill.
But was the possibility of mental health issues an excuse for brutally assaulting and murdering an innocent young woman? The prosecution certainly didn't think so. In fact, they pointed out that the likelihood that Philip had early onset schizophrenia that hadn't been diagnosed was extremely slim. They would further state that at the end of the day, Philip could have chosen to get help. He could have chosen not to become a killer. He could have chosen to let Colleen, an innocent young woman, live.
This was Colleen Ritzer. This is Colleen Ritzer. This is the Colleen Ritzer who was alone in that bathroom and in those woods with Philip Chisholm not a mentally ill child, not someone powerless to voices in his head. The only person powerless in those bathrooms, in those woods, is Colleen Ritzer. Because she was alone with the person who robbed her of her underwear, who raped her again with a tree branch, and who murdered her with deliberate premeditation and with extreme atrocity.
These horrific details are all things that Colleen's family would have to hear over and over again in court as they painfully relived her murder. At the end of the day, it would fall into the hands of the jury to decide, was Philip Chisholm guilty or was he not? They came to their decision on December 15th, 2015.
Has your jury agreed upon verdict?
Yes.
Everyone waited in anticipation for the verdict to be read. It would determine whether or not justice would be served for this innocent woman.
Mr. Foreman, what say you to indictment number 2013-1446, charging the defendant, Philip Chisholm, with murder in the first degree? Is the defendant guilty or not guilty? And if guilty, guilty of what? On what theory?
Guilty, deliberate premeditation, and extreme atrocity with cruelty.
And with that, Colleen's family finally had the answer they were looking for. Philip appeared stoic and showed little emotion as the verdict was read. On Philip's sentencing day, Colleen's family would finally have the opportunity to address her killer in court and say everything that they had been keeping to themselves for so long. They got to sit right alongside the judge and tell him directly to his face how this senseless murder changed their lives forever. Her father expressed his hatred toward her killer.
Her killer knew exactly what he was doing and has never shown remorse. I hate Colleen's killer and will never forgive him.
Her mother expressed her heartbreak.
Today, the good must prevail over the evil. You need to remember that Colleen matters.
Her brother demanded that Philip was beyond the point of rehabilitation and deserved life imprisonment.
Put this animal behind bars for the maximum possible sentence. Do not give this coward the opportunity to shatter another family's lives.
Those that came to speak on Colleen's behalf wore articles of clothing in her favorite color, pink. The last teacher who spoke to Colleen before her brutal murder was among those to speak.
I miss her friendship. I miss Colleen.
Even after hearing all these victim impact statements, Philip showed not one bit of emotion or remorse. But the judge heard the words of Colleen's family and friends and took them to heart.
When something terrible happens, people will often say it could always be worse. It is difficult for this court to imagine what could be worse for an individual or a family to endure than the brutal and senseless murder of Colleen Ritzer.
The judge made a point to acknowledge that Colleen's family worked hard to help provide her with a good education so she could have the opportunity to live out her dream as a teacher. And Colleen too had worked so hard to get this position and to ensure that she was the best teacher she could possibly be. And yet, after all of this, Colleen was only able to enjoy her job as a teacher for a very short period of time before her life was callously snuffed out. He also discussed how Colleen was nothing but selfless, all the way up to her death at the hands of Philip Chisholm.
He carefully and deliberately prepared to kill his math teacher. The school day ended at 1:55 p.m. But Colleen Ritzer, like thousands of other conscientious teachers, was not done with her workday. As was her practice, she stayed after school to make herself available for students who needed academic help.
The judge further acknowledged that while he was unable to act upon his own feelings, it was impossible to ignore the absolute evil of this case.
The jury found to a moral certainty that the defendant killed Colleen Ritzer and that he was criminally responsible for her murder. The court will impose a sentence in this case without emotion, passion, sympathy, or pity. But one cannot see and hear what this court has during the course of this case without feeling that the crashing waves of this tragedy will never wane.
and finally, he would declare his sentence.
Sentencing a human being to prison comes with a solemn obligation to craft a sentence no more or less than justice requires. This inexact process is central to the maintenance of our social compact and part of the core of the concept of ordered liberty. This court will impose the mandatory life sentence for the murder of Colleen Ritzer and set a parole eligibility date of 25 years, the highest level our law allows.
Just like he did during the guilty verdict, Philip appeared emotionless and cold. Upon the announcement of the verdict, Colleen's family had another opportunity to speak. They expressed their outrage towards the defense of their daughter's killer.
We are disgusted and personally offended with the defense's repulsive recommendation that Colleen's killer be parole eligible. Evil cannot be rehabilitated.
Because Philip was so young at the time he committed this crime, the judge wasn't able to sentence him to prison without parole, even if he wanted to. But the fact that their daughter's killer faced the ability to one day live outside the walls of prison didn't sit right with the Ritzer family. After all, had Colleen not been murdered, it's very likely she would have lived on for many more years. Why does her killer get that right when hers was stolen from her? Do you believe that Philip's sentence was justified, or did Colleen Ritzer deserve more? Let us know in the comments. Most of all, let this bright, innocent woman be remembered forever.
Unspeakable. That's the word one school official is using to describe the murder of a beloved high school teacher. Her body, with severe trauma to the head, was found hidden in a local park. And now 2 16-year-old students have been charged as adults in her killing.
Nohema Graber was a 66-year-old Spanish teacher who taught at Fairfield High School in Iowa, where she taught for 9 years. She was born in Zacapa, Mexico, about 80 miles from Mexico City. After meeting her husband, Paul Graber, she moved to his hometown in Iowa. Even though their marriage would ultimately come to an end a few years before her death, they remained close friends. She was well loved by her family and her students. In fact, she had even received special praise and acknowledgement from a student during National Teacher Appreciation Week.
Happy Teacher Appreciation Week, Mrs. Graber. Thank you for all that you do in and out of the classroom. We really appreciate how much fun we have in your class and how much Spanish we learn. And we just hope you have a really good day. Gracias.
Fellow teacher Diane Beckel echoed this sentiment.
She was a classy lady. She was a dedicated lady. She cared deeply about the kids as people.
It's hard to imagine that this kind of teacher would be killed at the hands of 2 of her own students. Just days before her murder in November 2021, Nohema visited a local library in order to view a display that had been put up in honor of the Day of the Dead. This is a holiday celebrated by those of Hispanic heritage in which they celebrate the lives of loved ones that have already passed away. While at the display, she made a chilling comment about this holiday that was later reported in the local paper. She told the reporter, "We all know we are going to die. It's our way of laughing at death." Willard Noble Chaden Miller and Jeremy Everett Goodale were 16 years old when they made the decision to take Nohema's life. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision, but something that they carefully planned out. On November 3rd of 2021, Nohema went out for her normal walk in the park. It was the same thing she did every single day, only this time she never came home. Her family immediately became worried and suspicious and called 911 to report her as a missing person. Not long after, she was discovered dead.
It's a shocking killing. A beloved high school teacher found slain in a park. Now comes another shock. These 2 students charged with her slaying.
Police first set their sights on Chaden and Jeremy after a student witness came forward and said that they had seen Snapchat messages between the 2 discussing the details of the murder. It's unclear if this was reported before or after the actual murder took place.
Police say the 2 accused boys knew that she took a stroll in the park every day and that they were waiting to ambush her. The cause of death is said to be a blow to her head.
It's also known that Nohima was killed with the use of a baseball bat and that Chaden took a wheelbarrow from his own home and used it to transport the body. He was later seen pushing the wheelbarrow down a city street late at night.
Chaden Miller and Jeremy Goodale are charged with first-degree homicide. This photo shows Miller and his sisters reenacting the famous painting American Gothic. And this video shows a young Goodale during Christmas.
Tons of fun.
In a Facebook posting, the slain teacher's son says, "I forgive them and feel sorry that they had that anger in their hearts. There's no point in being angry at them. My mother was an angel of a woman and was one of the kindest souls."
Fairfield High School was temporarily closed following the murder of Nohima Graber so that students and staff would have the opportunity to mourn. Meanwhile, Chaden and Jeremy are in serious legal trouble. Their trial has not yet started and could go a lot of different ways. It's possible that they could be spending much of their lives in prison. However, because they're not adults, they will have the eligibility for parole at some point, according to Iowa state laws. We do know one thing. It was determined that the teens will be charged as adults, not juveniles. This can have a huge impact on their sentences. That's because if they were charged as juveniles, there would be a likelihood that their sentence could be extremely minor, allowing them to be released when they turn 18 years old. This, of course, doesn't seem like much of a punishment, considering the severity of their crime. When Chaden appeared in court earlier this year, he was seen wearing an orange jumpsuit and protective vest. He seemed relatively calm as he sat down next to his lawyers, who had requested that his case be held in juvenile court.
Miller's attorney said his chances at rehabilitation were better in the juvenile system, but the judge said there just isn't enough time to fulfill rehabilitation from such a magnitude of a crime before he ages out of the system at age 18. He's 17 now.
What the sentencing for these boys will be is still up in the air, but that's not the only question that remains. What was the possible motive for this case? Why did these boys do this? So far, the answer to that has not been released by the police. What do you believe the proper sentence for these teens should be? Let us know in the comments.
He's the boy who described murdering his teacher as fine and dandy. Will Cornick, just 15 when he stabbed Dan Maguire to death in front of a classroom full of fellow pupils. Family and friends of the teacher gathered united outside court, having just heard the details of her last moments of life.
Anne Maguire was a 61-year-old Spanish teacher who taught at Corpus Christi Catholic in Leeds, London. She and her husband, Donald, had been married for 37 years, and they had 2 grown daughters. Anne had dedicated her life to teaching, having worked at the school for 40 years, and had only 5 months to go before retirement when her life was callously snuffed out. The perpetrator, Will Cornick, was just 15 years old. Although his parents were divorced, he came from a pretty stable home. His behavior at school was also pretty stable. He rarely got in trouble and was considered by others as academically stable. But for some reason, he took an extreme dislike to his teacher, Anne Maguire. In fact, most people would call it a deep hatred. The reasons why were never really fully revealed. This is a picture of Will's creepy Facebook page that gives an indication of the type of person he is. He actually reached out to his friends and asked them if they would be willing to kill Anne in exchange for money.
The 15-year-old boy told classmates that he wanted Mrs. Maguire dead. Even on Christmas Day last year, he exchanged Facebook messages with a friend in which he spoke of his teacher's brutal killing. In February this year, he posted another Facebook message in which he said Mrs. Maguire deserves more than death, more than pain, torture, and more than anything that we can ever understand.
When there weren't any takers, he began to plan to carry out the murder himself, 4 days in advance. It was in this classroom that he would end up stabbing her to death in the middle of a lesson. She was stabbed 7 times, both in her neck and back, and her jugular vein was sliced. In the middle of the assault, he chased her as she tried to flee the classroom. A language arts teacher who was in a nearby room came running and managed to separate the boy from the teacher, but it was too late. She would die of her injuries.
As the teacher was dying, her attacker returned to the room where he'd been working and spoke 2 words to the entire class: good times. As another teacher took hold of him, he said, "Can you be careful? My knuckle is hurting and my hand is bleeding."
Will would later tell the police that he felt nothing but happiness and pride in association with the fact that he killed Anne. In fact, he had even brought a bottle of whiskey ahead of time that he planned to use to celebrate. He also said that he believed that he had only 2 options. He could either kill her or kill himself. He knew that her family would be heartbroken, but that didn't matter to him. He had no sympathy.
In my eyes, everything I've done is fine and dandy.
Will was ultimately sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 20 years. Meanwhile, the family and friends of Anne have been left behind to try to pick up the pieces. Her family stated that they don't want this tragedy to define her, but for her to be remembered for all the beautiful things she was and what she meant to others.
We wish that nothing of Anne's life be lost, that she will be remembered as a life's partner, a mother, a sister, a Nana Anne, an auntie, and genuine teacher with a generous spirit who led by example.